We have quorum?
Yes.
Members of council, this meeting is now resumed. Just a sec. I'll acknowledge you, Councillor Cole. Before we do that, members, I would like to call upon the city solicitor at this time to introduce our declined students from legal who are present in the chamber this morning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Every year we have a new group of articling students start working with us, and this year our students started last year. Members of council may not see the articling students very often, but rest assured that when we have a complex or novel issue, the students are involved in helping us to ensure that we have all of the background information and the research that we require to provide advice to you. Our new students are sitting over here in the first row. Their names are Aiden Alexio, Gail Wehompe, Aisha Hussain, Molly Lawson, Amna Shakil, and Tushir Sharma. And I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to see council because this provides a broader context for all of the work that they do every day, and it's a very important day for them. So thank you for the indulgence, Madam Speaker, and welcome, students.
Councillor Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to take a minute to thank our Toronto City staff, our Toronto Water, Toronto Transportation, and Toronto Fire for responding to a serious emergency that occurred yesterday in the west end of the city. We had 80 millimeters of rain that fell in a 2-hour period, which is about a 80-year storm that occurred. They came in and cleared out the catch basins. They pulled cars out of rain ponds. Anyways, they acted quickly. Luckily, there was nobody hurt, no reports of that. And I know this is sort of an unusual situation because if you're in Scarborough and the east end, central, it didn't happen. But it's one of these climate disaster events that is occurring more and more. It was a big funnel cloud over Black Creek watershed. So I just want to thank all Toronto staff for responding quickly, effectively, and efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole, and I just want to make a comment as well. My area got flooded. I think it was the highest in my area, in the Rockcliffe area, and I just want to thank city staff and as well Toronto Fire Services and all the staff that were involved that responded to the calls yesterday. So thank you to staff. Members of council, we will now review and confirm the order paper. There are 51 items left on the agenda, including 15 member motions. To move this agenda along, I propose that council consider items in the following order today. The 3 variance items, EX 7.14, 15, and 18, to be considered together. MM 9.36 on expanding housing options in Toronto. EC 6.4 on children's services, 2019 federal and provincial budgets. And GL 6.31 on vehicles for hire as the first item after lunch. And CC 9.14 on Lakeshore Boulevard West and Park Lawn Road. I will now take the release of member holds. Please put your name under request to question staff. Councillor Perks?
Sorry, on a point of order, did I hear you say you wanted to consider EX 14, 15, and 18 together?
Yes.
So I don't know if you moved that as a motion because I want to speak against it.
Okay, I'll move that as a motion then. Recorded vote. Yeah. Okay, recorded vote. Oh, you want to speak to it? Okay, sorry. Councillor Perks?
So, Speaker, the 3 items that you said we consider together have to do with the capital spending, the operating spending for last year, and the operating spending variance report for the first part of this year. There are distinct issues on each and every one of them, and I think it's important that we have an opportunity to ask staff questions about things like why our revenues last year didn't match our projections for the first time in over a decade and what our plan is to deal with it. That's a distinct question from what the operating issues that we have this year, which have been in fact affected by the provincial budget. They're not the same issue. The fact that they have something to do with finance would say that 90% of our agenda should be considered together because they all have financial implications, as the budget chief well knows.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so recorded vote. Just on that piece, yes. Yes, all three. I'm recommending that we do the three variances items considered together. Yes. This is my ruling, yes. Well, a motion, okay, let's just vote. Recorded vote. I'm proposing that we deal with the three variance items together.
Councillor Bailao, please.
The motion to deal with the three items together carries 16-4.
Okay, I will now take the release of polls. Councillor Grimes?
Good morning, Madam Speaker. You were just going fast. So after lunch, we're going to deal with 9.14. When is that happening? Right after lunch?
We're going to deal with GL 6.31 on vehicles for hire after lunch, and then following that would be Lakeshore Boulevard.
I don't want to split hairs, but would it not be better to deal with 9.14, so we have to go on camera on that before I clear the chamber? I'm at your, but would it not better to open?
Because then we have to come back in public, so that's why I'm suggesting that one after the for hire.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Min Wong.
I can't make it to a committee.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Fletcher?
Thank you, Speaker. There are a number of local planning appeals here that have been sent to us by staff, and I'm wondering if you could, I believe that we're trying to figure out if we don't finish what will get deferred. So I think that I'd like to have planning indicate if any of those can be deferred, and if not, advise you of that.
I'm sorry, you want to defer?
No, I want to make sure that we don't run out of time, and we haven't considered that there are ones here that have to be dealt with because they're going to the OMB.
Okay, well, hopefully, I mean, maybe some of them could be released, or?
Well, we'll see.
Okay, well, I'm suggesting we try to release as many items as we
I know
can.
you are. I
Yeah,
know.
thank you. Deputy Mayor Min Wong, quick release.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Members' motion 9.32, building the Chinatown gates. I'm happy to release that.
MM 9.32, you're releasing?
Yes.
Okay. On favor, carried. Oh, do you have another one? Okay.
Do. Has MM 9.57 been dealt with on Valleywoods? I remember introducing it. I'm not sure whether it cleared the...
Well, it was introduced yesterday, so do you just?
I'll try and introduce this. This is more of a technical thing that staff support. It has to do with sanitary sewers.
Okay.
So it's MM 9.57.
So you want to make a technical amendment?
No, I was just explaining the motion.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to release it. It's in my ward.
So you're going to move it?
Yes, please.
Okay. MM 9.57, all in favor, carried. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm just curious, and I apologize, this would be a point of order, actually. Point of personal privilege, I should say. EX 7.2, protecting the viability of street festivals, response to item number MM 5.17. I did mention yesterday, Madam Speaker, that we did have senior ranking officers from the Toronto Police here for the past 2 days. I'm just curious, given all the items before us, should I try to time this now? And the reason being is because it has been sitting on the top of the first page of items to be dealt with, and we have not gotten to it. And the question is, are we going to be dealing with that immediately this today? Or do we have another timed item? Because I've lost track of what's before us on day 3.
So you want to, you're proposing a timed item?
Are we dealing with, is that the first matter of today? No?
No.
Okay, just because it's not on the order paper, that's all. So then I would like to time that item, and what are the available time slots? Like,
Okay, that will have to be done after the Lakeshore Boulevard one later this afternoon.
okay, and that's the first one after lunch.
That
is
will be the third item this afternoon.
third item this afternoon?
Yeah.
Okay, after lunch. Thank you very much. Then I would,
Okay, so you want to move that?
yes, I would move to
Okay.
time this as a third item after lunch.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to release members' motion 9.30 with a friendly amendment I'd like to move.
9.30, yes?
Yep. Yes, the amendment. Yep,
You're doing the friendly amendment?
that's right.
Okay. Does the staff have it?
Yep.
Oh, okay. We can put it on the screen. Okay, the amendment is on the screen. All in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Fletcher?
Oh, yes, Speaker, I'd like to release on page 4, DE7 1.29, Leslie Street and Lakeshore Boulevard intersection safety. It is to put a no right turn on red, and I'm just hoping that this can be put in very quickly because a child was injured on the bike signal there just this week when someone was turning right.
Okay, on
Just
page
looking
4.
I'm just looking at Madam Gray to see if
Okay.
that's possible. Thank you.
On page 4, at the bottom of the page, Councillor Fletcher is releasing. All in favor? Carried. Councillor Crawford?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have to reopen an item from Scarborough Community Council, and staff have asked me to introduce that now. I don't know if they have the motion ready. It's SC 7.7. It's a technical amendment from staff
Okay.
that has to be introduced.
Okay, the motion is on the screen to remove it from Scarborough and bring it forward. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And that will be circulated. Councillor Bailao?
Yes, Madam Speaker, page 4, item 7.3, appeals of citywide zoning bylaw. I can release that.
Okay, on page 4. Okay. We have an amendment that you had,
Yes, I had tabled it. There's a supplementary report.
okay, so if we can put it on the screen. That's on page 4, PH 7.3.
Yeah.
It's on the screen. All in favor? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Recorded vote.
Councillor Bailao, please.
Councillor Cole, please.
The item is amended, carries unanimously, 23 in favor.
Councillor Bailao, you have another one?
I'm going to try another one. Item 7.1, changing lanes. I do have an amendment, a little motion, and I'm going to try to release it as a quick item. Page 3, and a recorded vote for Councillor Holiday.
Okay, recorded vote.
On the item, this one's.
Okay, okay, there's the amendment on the screen. On favor, carried. Item is amended, recorded vote.
Councillor Karygiannis, when you're seated, please.
Councillor Crawford, please.
The item is amended, carries 22 to 1.
Okay, Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This is on page 6. The item is MM 9.14. There's an amendment.
Okay,
And this is just to amend recommendation 2 to speak to the relevant ministries. We had made an error in the ministry that was responsible
okay, that's
for
on page
retirement.
6, MM 9.14, protecting seniors' housing. There's an amendment on the screen. On favor, carried. Item is amended. On favor, carried.
Don't evict seniors.
Councillor Cressy.
Thank you, Speaker. I have 3. On page 6, item MM 9.58, authorization to release Section 3745 funds
Okay,
around various projects for affordable housing.
okay, on page 6.
MM 9.58 on page 6.
Members' motion on page 6, MM 9.58, which was circulated yesterday. On favor, carried.
Thank you, Speaker. The second on the same page, page 6, MM 9.59, request to amend the capital budget for heritage lighting. It's funded through 37.
Okay,
MM 9.59.
on favor, carried.
Thank you, Speaker. I have a third on page 7, MM 9.60, request to amend the PFNR capital budget around the installation of the new York Street Park, again, funded through 42.
Okay, page 7, MM 9.60, on favor, carried. Councillor Baila?
Madam Speaker, I know that you had acknowledged me, but I do have another release if you want to
All
take
right.
that. Okay. Page 6, MM 9.56, authorization to release a Section 45.
Okay, on page 6, MM 9.56, on favor, carried. Mayor Tory.
I was hopeful, Madam Speaker, we might deal with MM 9.64 on page 7. This is the motion that I put on the order paper yesterday to allow us to accept any funds should we be called upon pursuant to our offer to help the Northern Ontario communities. It just authorizes us to accept the funding to make that happen if we're called upon.
Okay, on page 7, MM 9.64, on favor, carried. Councillor Fillion, did you want to release your member's motion on page 6? MM 9.55? Okay. MM 9.55, on favor, carried. You want a recorded vote on that? Okay, recorded vote. That's on MM 9.55, recorded vote.
Councillor Layton, please. Councillor Thompson.
Councillor Wong-Tam, please.
The item is adopted unanimously, 23 in favor.
Okay?
Were introduced that weren't held on page 6 and 7, and perhaps, unless there's holds, we could dispense with those.
Well, that's what we're doing now.
Oh, are we? Thank you.
Yeah, we're releasing all those.
Well, we're just voting on them. They're not, okay, go ahead. Yep.
No, we're releasing. We're moving them.
Yes, moving them.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
got it. Thank you.
On page 7, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, you have a member's motion, MM 9.61. Did you want to move that one? But the Integrity Commissioner.
Oh, yes, yes, thank you for reminding me, Speaker. Yes, I'm happy to move that.
Okay. On page 7, MM 9.61, all in favor, carried. Councillor Layton, would you like to move MM 9.62?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. MM 9.62, all in favor, carried. And I'll move MM 9.63. All in favor, carried. So I have reviewed an urgent motion that would be added onto the agenda. I believe it's Councillor Cressy. Councillor Cressy?
Thank you, Speaker. It is urgent as the lands are currently for sale and on the market without any inclusion for planning or affordable housing requirements.
Okay, on favor? Carried. All those in favor of adopting the order paper? On favor? Carried. Now, members, as this is our third day and we have many items left to finish, I'm not prepared to entertain further motions without notice. If you have something, I'm asking that you speak to me. I must be convinced that this matter is truly urgent. In any event, I will not accept anything further motions after 11 a.m. this morning. Okay, so we're going to do EX 7.14, 15, and 18. Councillor Perks.
So I guess I'll begin with questions to the Chief Financial Officer. So my understanding is that although we had a positive variance this year, or for the year 2018, we actually did not meet our revenue targets in that year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's like the first year we have brought in less revenue than we projected going back, well, at least 15 years.
Through the Speaker, yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we essentially made up, I forget what the positive variance is, it's in the 120 million range, something like that?
140.
140 plus whatever we were down on the revenue side, which was 80-ish.
86.
So we made up $200 million plus in underspending on programs that City Council had approved.
Actually, not all through program spending. There are some expenses like bad debt write-offs, debt service charges. So there are large items.
How much then did we underspend on the suite of services that Council had approved for the 2018 budget?
From a program perspective?
Yes.
Approximately 80 million, 88 million.
$88 million of public services that we had approved. Your predecessors and the city manager's predecessors had given us several reports indicating that it was an increasingly likely risk that we would underperform on our revenue because of our increased reliance on the land transfer tax for our operating budget. That's correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And they had proposed that the City of Toronto should develop a long-term financial plan so that we could avoid that risk recurring in future years. Correct?
That's correct.
At the end of last term, City Council, after having been promised a long-term financial plan every year through the whole term, didn't actually have an opportunity to debate the long-term financial plan, did it?
Through the Speaker, as far as I know, no, it did not.
No, it went to Executive Committee where it was not forwarded on to Council. What work is being done and when will Council see it to help us prevent or help us avoid those problems that your predecessors warned us about?
Through the speaker, if you recall in our last council meeting in June, we acknowledged that we were doing some work with Ernst & Young with regards to a value-based outcome review, and that was to help us address the fiscal challenges that face us in 2020 and in the out years. And that outcomes review is ongoing right now. We don't have the results of that, but we are looking at revenues, we are looking at policies, we are looking at program outcomes. We are actually looking at a broad range of opportunities to help address the problems on a go-forward basis.
Councillor Perks, just one sec. Put your time on hold. If I can ask, please, quiet in the council chambers. Councillor Bailao, Councillor Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Speaker. So if I heard you correctly, the work that Ernst & Young is doing, which will include work on revenue, will be completed prior to the 2020 budget, or is that correct?
Through the speaker, yes, that's correct.
And council will have an opportunity to review their recommendations prior to considering the 2020 budget?
Through the speaker.
Marilyn.
Through the speaker, the report from Ernst & Young will be received by the senior management team in the month of August. We will be working on that to prepare our budget recommendations for the 2020 cycle.
I understand that, but as your predecessors have said, the issue is structural. It's not a one budget problem. So again, will council have an opportunity to consider and debate or review any recommendations from the Ernst & Young report prior to our consideration and approval of the 2020 budget?
Through the speaker, yes.
Thank you.
That's a possibility. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Perks, would you like to speak? Oh, Sir Crawford, you have a question?
Just one quick question. With regard to the underspending in the revenue that Councillor Perks had mentioned, we did have an underspending or revenue with the MLTT. Can you just give me what that number was?
Through the speaker, the MLTT shortfall, do you want the actual revenue line or the shortfall?
Just a shortfall from what we were anticipating.
It was 82 million.
So that pretty much takes care of the revenue shortfall that Councillor Perks had mentioned.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Perks to speak.
I'm ready to motion, Speaker.
Oh.
If I hadn't had three items crammed together.
Okay, so why don't you get that motion and then we can, they're in the process of doing it, right? Okay. Councillor Fillion, on page 6, you held down MM 9.36.
We're at that item now.
Yes, because these are the items that we voted on to do, and Councillor Perks is doing his motion for the variance, and this item is next.
If you could, sorry, I have an amendment, but I thought we were going to get to this much later in the day. If you could.
Well, can you please give your motion, because we've already timed these items.
Yes, I didn't realize it was a timed item. Thank you.
Well, okay, can you please give the clerk your motion so we can deal with
I'm
it?
just working on it,
Yeah.
Madam Speaker. I didn't realize it was coming up this early today.
Yeah, but you held it down yesterday. Okay, but just give us, be patient just for a minute. meantime, I can take quick releases if anybody's thinking of it. Okay, Councillor Filion?
Yes, so I have an amendment adding the words, "and the planning staff consult with registered homeowners associations prior to submitting their report." While I think the amendment is necessary, I can't unfortunately support the general motion, but only because of the way it is written. I certainly support the notion that we need to provide different types of housing in all parts of the city, including the area I represent, and I have been having discussions to look at the best way to do that. I think the motion in front of us, the way it's worded, has unintended consequences. Whenever you talk about what's implied here is that we might throw out the planning rules. I don't think the planning staff are going to come back and say, let's toss the official plan in the recycling bin, but the way this is worded, it would appear that that is possibly the intent, and I'm frankly not clear what the intent of this motion is as far as how wide it intends to go. So what this does is really, again, the way it's worded, really waves a red flag in front of the large number of community associations across the city who, one of their primary functions is to protect neighborhoods, and they spend an awful lot of time on planning issues directed at doing just that. I don't think that the mayor and Councillor Bailão intend to dismantle our neighborhood protections, but you certainly wouldn't know that from the way this is worded. So, you know, I would have much preferred to change the wording of this so that it didn't have the unintended consequences. However, I've been unable to convince the mayor's office or the or councillor bylaw of the wisdom of doing that. So I will have to vote against it. And the other completely unintended consequence, I'm sure, is when you when you look like you're eliminating the planning rules, what you do is you fuel land speculation, so that, for example, in places where you your official plan says we want intensification, you cause people not to intensify there because they would rather do it in the interior of the neighborhood if they think they can get away with it because, for example, to pick a simple example, you can sell townhouses more for more on an interior street, and you can buy the land cheaper. So why would anybody assemble on the main street where we've said we want, for example, townhouses or walk-ups, whatever, for more money and be able to sell them for less? So you start land speculation within the interior of neighborhoods, which is what probably one of the primary things that it has affected affordability in this city. So while I applaud what I think is the thinking behind what I think is the intent behind this motion, I think the wording is really unfortunate, and I think it has the potential to create unnecessary divisions within our city.
Thank you. We do have a question for you, Councillor Perks. 3 minutes, clarification.
Yeah, thank you very much, Speaker. Councillor Fillion, I think I can support your amendment. I just think there's a word, and I think it's inadvertent, when you say registered homeowner associations.
Yeah, no, I didn't, sorry, community association.
Community associations?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, that's all I needed.
Yeah, if I can
Thank
make that
you.
change. Thank you.
Councillor Bradford, do you have a question to Councillor Fillion?
Yep. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Appreciate the motion. Did you add that amendment because the way it was written, you felt that city planning would not consult with residents associations?
I did speak with the chief planner, and I'm very confident that planning staff will consult with community associations at some point. It wasn't clear when. One of the unfortunate things with this is that it was introduced the day before a council meeting. It didn't go through committee, and for large parts of the city, this is a very, very big issue. For large parts of the city, this is as big or bigger than Bill 108. So it, the residents of the city didn't have a chance to comment on the scope of this at committee, where it should have happened, in my opinion. So I want to make sure that they have a chance to comment on the scope of it and the parameters of it prior to a report coming back to committee. If it had been this wouldn't have been necessary if it had just got on the agenda of the planning committee.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, Mayor Tory.
Put my name up. Madam Speaker, I just want to speak to this. First of all, to talk a little bit about the intent of this motion put by myself and Deputy Mayor Bylaw, and I know with the support, for example, of Councillor Bradford, who's taken a keen interest in this over a long time. But I'll start off by saying that the intention all the way along, and confirmed again this morning by the Chief Planner, was to, as they would do in the ordinary circumstance on something like this, to consult community associations, and so I will support the motion as being something that really just states, for certainty, something that I think is very important. But I just in terms of the comments made through you, Madam Speaker, by Councillor Fillion, I don't think anybody was proposing, least of all me or Deputy Mayor Bylaw, that we should be, I think you said, throw the Planning Act or throw the planning, our plans out the window. But at the same time, this is very specifically meant to say that the status quo exactly as written, cannot does not allow us the opportunity to do some things that we simply have to do as a city in order to make sure that we are taking the short, medium, and long-range view with respect to opportunities that we have to produce thousands of additional housing units. You know, it's interesting to me that the laneway housing, and I know there will still be some debates taking place in neighborhoods as the reality of laneway housing comes to be in front of us with people actually building the laneway housing, but there were various people that were, you know, perspiring heavily about that as a step that we took, which I think is very much in the interest of addressing what people here generally agree. And certainly, I'm under no doubt at all about what the electorate felt during the last election as being the most important challenge facing the city, among many, that being the lack of supply of affordable rental housing in particular, affordable housing generally. And so, again, I think we're handling this in the way that I would always want to handle these kinds of things, which is not to come in here with some motion that sort of, you know, declares a conclusion and says this is what we should do or these are the changes we should make to allow, you know, this, that, or the other form of housing, but rather asks our most senior chief planner, our most senior professional public servant in this area, to please go and look at the available options, which he and his staff and his team are familiar with. In our discussion about it, I suggested he could also look at some of the things we see happening in other cities and that come back with a report which then would be not only subject to the consultation that would be done with the community associations in the course of writing the report, but also it'll then be subject, since it's coming back to the Planning and Housing Committee, to the usual public discussion that will happen with deputations and, of course, a discussion here at the City Council. But to me, you know, some people will say that I come later to these things than I should. Some people will say that we never should come to this at all because it does jar the status quo or proposes the possible jarring of the status quo. I just look at it and say the time has come, you know, for us to have an honest discussion about this, to look clearly through the eyes first of our professional planners at ways in which we can innovatively, compatibly, sensitively, responsibly, but nonetheless that we can move to address something that is a very significant problem for a very large number of people in the city, not to mention the growth that's going to take place in the city going forward. And so, you know, there will be a wide range of opinions. Even when you mention specific words in here, duplexes, low-rise walk-up apartments. I had somebody talking about the equivalent in suburban terms of laneway housing, which I think somebody called a driveway house. But, you know, even when you mention things like that, people immediately start sort of flapping their hands and you know, getting excited about it. And I'd say, well, fine, we can get excited about these things, but we have a responsibility to look at them in a responsible way and to look at those options and, if necessary, to challenge the status quo. And the best thing I think we can do when we have that report in hand is to go out and inform the public and have a dialogue with the public, because I think far more members of the public than we think actually understand completely that in a growing, successful city like this, if we fail to look at these options and fail to take some of them and make this kind of housing available to people, we will jeopardize the success of the city, not to mention that we will leave an awful lot of people in the lurch, having to leave the city, having to find themselves in a circumstance where they're allocating far more of their income than they should have to housing, or that people just will stop coming here, which I think would not be in the best interest of the city. And so this is one of those things where I'm proud to move this motion. I watched what was going on in other cities across the United States where they were bringing in various policies, and I'm not endorsing or criticizing any of them. I could just see other cities were addressing this, and I felt, and then I talked to my own team and to Deputy Mayor Bilo and to Councillor Bradford and others and the Chief Planner, and just said we at least have to initiate an examination of this in a responsible way, and I think that's exactly what this does, and there'll be lots of opportunity for everybody, including everybody in this room, to be consulted and to have their voices heard. But the notion of not dealing with it, to me, was not on. So I'm very glad to be beginning this process today, and I hope it will have actually quite little debate in the context of beginning a process and asking for a report that then will be subject to full and complete debate, and that there will be very broad support for the notion of owning up to our responsibilities to address this part of the housing market that is not being developing the way it should, and more importantly, the people who are not finding any options available to them in the city that they need in order to live here and to contribute here as we want them to do. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Perks?
Thank you, Speaker. While I will be supporting this motion, it is not for the reasons just stated by the Mayor. And I'm going to take a moment, I'm going to get back to in a moment why I think the Mayor's argument doesn't work. I think there are good urban form reasons to have a variety of housing forms in neighborhoods. The area I represent historically has always done that, and it means that you have people in a variety of phases of life. Before they have kids, when they've retired, they can stay in the same neighborhood, and there's value to that. The argument, though, that some make that this has something to do with providing more housing affordability and more housing choice is absolute nonsense. First of all, the number of units that will be produced if we relax zoning in the so-called yellow belt will be in the dozens, maybe the hundreds. Right now, we have 144,000 units that are approved and awaiting construction in the City of Toronto. This is not even a drop in the ocean. This is moisture hovering above the ocean in terms of the volume of housing that you will be producing. The second thing is that in no way will this housing form be affordable. When we were considering putting in laneway housing initially, some of the advocates said we should make it affordable. When we got the business cases back from the affordable housing staff, they said basically to us, for the amount of money that you would have to subsidize to get these units constructed and pay the rents on them, you could produce 3 times as much affordable housing in other forms. Ground-related housing in established neighborhoods is going to cost $300,000 a unit to build and is going to rent for at least twice as much as what the median income in the City of Toronto can support. I've seen business cases proposed for these triplexes in Scarborough or North York, which pretty much make it the case that only people in the top 15 or 20% of income will be able to afford these new triplexes, duplexes, and townhouses. This will be luxury boutique housing. This is not about affordable housing. I don't object to that, but let's not lose sight of the fact that it has nothing to do with affordable housing. It also, as Councillor Fillion pointed out, will lead to increased land value speculation inside our neighbourhoods. In many jurisdictions where there is a very hot real estate market, upzoning increases land price because you get the speculators and you get the people who are trying to make a quick buck in a hot real estate market move in. Increasingly, the work that we are getting put in front of us at the Planning and Housing Committee, where we had the UN Special Rapporteur on housing and homelessness come to us, said that the problem isn't supply. The problem is the increasing financialization of the housing market. The housing market globally is the single largest financial object in human history. It's worth about, if I'm remembering, $170 trillion. There's never been a bigger river of money flowing around for people to speculate on and try to divert a little bit their way. And the amount of money made off housing by real estate income trusts, by private mortgage brokers, by all the various people who are financing the condo developers, who are financing the small builders, all taking their share, means that now the price of housing is about 50% or 40-50% the cost to build, 10 or 15% fees, and the rest is all return on investment for people who are financing builders or are themselves builders. A third of the cost of housing is now the financialization of housing in the Toronto market. And that tells me that the way you solve the problem is not by opening up supply. That just increases the speculative profits being made. It means that the only solution is if we as a society start to build social housing where that financialization is no longer part of the price. If we go back to the housing models of the 60s and 70s where the federal, provincial, and municipal governments were actually investing in public housing, in co-ops, and not-for-profit, that's how you get affordability back. So don't get confused. While it's good on an urban form basis to support this work, it has nothing to do with affordable housing. If we want to solve the affordable housing problem, we have to have the courage to spend public money to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. I have a motion here, and I would like to request our Chief Planner to include in the report back opportunities for a missing middle pilot in Ward 19 with consultation with the local councillor in our community. I think that this is a really important initiative, and I'd like to commend the Mayor and our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Bilau, for bringing this forward today. It takes leadership. This is, of course, a challenging conversation, and I appreciate Councillor Perks' remarks there. There are a lot of moving pieces on this file. When I ran for City Council, I often spoke about my experience as a civil servant here and the challenges that we saw balancing local politics with good planning. And the motion here from the Mayor and Councillor Bilau really is an example of leadership on that file, trying to strike a good balance between both. We're asking for a report back and more information on an issue that has, been bubbling under the surface, number of op-eds, Twitter, Reddit. A lot of people have been talking about this for many years now. And Council is coming together to take action on this file, which I think is fantastic. The very first item that we considered here at Council in the term was on Housing Now. And since then, at Planning and Housing Committee, we have had packed agendas trying to move forward on the housing file. We've made progress with respect to laneway suites, inclusionary zoning, protected dwelling rooms, updating our zoning to help locate shelters, implementing our open door initiatives, and many, many others. But I think right now we need to start the process at looking at the Yellow Belt, at looking at that missing middle housing options, and our continuing commitment to look at every option, putting all the options on the table for housing. I agree with Councillor Perks with respect to that this is an important addition in urban form here in Toronto. Over the past decade, with development and growth, we have seen a stark polarization where we have 60-story towers and we have vast extents of single detached housing. When you look at the R zoning in the City of Toronto, 2/3 of that is limited to single detached housing. And I think there is an option and an opportunity to introduce more gentle density and more options in that R zoning. This is largely a legacy and a product of amalgamation with our consolidated official plan and our consolidated zoning bylaw, and for 20 years, we've had the same approach. I think today, with the housing challenges and the pressures facing this city with less than 1% rental vacancy rate in Toronto, it's time for us to actually take another look. So by asking the Chief Planner, giving him that direction to come up with some options and a timeline to tackle this missing middle piece that we've been talking about, I think that's an important first step. In the last 5 years, we've built almost 93,000 housing units in Toronto. That's a lot. We've approved over 100,000 more. That's a lot. We have 150,000 units nearly in the pipeline. But despite that, the median income for families that own a home has fallen 15% since 2006 census, while the cost of owning a home has gone up 60%. This doesn't add up. We often get caught up in the debate, as Councillor Perks was alluding to, about supply or demand, but we're clearly building an incredible amount of supply. The question is this the right kind of supply? We've all seen the Three Cities report, Halchansky's work, that shows wealth is getting more polarized in the City of Toronto. And we hear our city manager talking time and time again that about intergenerational wealth and how the city is failing to keep things equal. If we're going to address those challenges, we actually need housing that serves in the middle. And that's housing affordability across the spectrum. Of course, missing middle housing is not going to solve the housing crisis. We need to continue pushing on all of the other initiatives, Housing Now, Create TO, TCH, public housing, open door, public-private partnerships. It's the whole suite. But for us not to take this opportunity to look at it today would be a failure. So I hope you can support this motion. I'd like to commend the leadership of our mayor and Councillor Bilau on this file, and I'm really looking forward to moving this forward with you in the fall. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have a question for you from Councillor Carroll.
Yep.
I was about to say I don't have the motion in front of me. I can't believe how fast it's already. I guess you advance circulated it. It's actually online already.
It's on the screen. It's on the screen.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about your, do you not want to wait until, would it not be a wiser direction, I should say, to wait until that report comes and that day you could move a pilot if a pilot is necessary? The report might actually indicate that this is possible in a number of areas and possible right away based on application. Whereas if you're asking him to propose a pilot, you're sort of presupposing that he's going to say it's risky and only do it in one place.
Well, I
Can we not
appreciate-
wait till that day?
Yeah, I appreciate if you haven't had a chance to read the motion, but it says a report back on opportunities. So I'm actually, what I'm doing is providing a context for them to look at. They're going to come up with a wide range of ideas, wide range of opportunities. That's going to be done through consultation.
Right, that's what
and
the,
so
yeah.
putting it in the context of like, here's a real example of what that could look like. That's what the motion intends to do. It's not necessarily saying there will or there will not be, but let's frame it up in a way where we actually have the context. So let me give you a for instance. You could take a look at our zoning, and you could say, all right, here's an area where we have our zoning in a community, and this is what that would look like. This is how that community would change if you opened up from RD, which is just residential detached,
Right.
to something that's a little bit more permissive.
I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, so that's
I have
what.
some areas in my ward where there's predatory development on townhouse sites going on that really concerns me. This is a great alternative.
Right.
But does your motion not sort of guide the chief planner to come back saying, let's pilot it in one specific area first?
No, I don't
As opposed to
think
he may
so.
say, we're ready to proceed based on application in a number of areas?
No, I think if you read the motion, you'll see it's a report back on the opportunities for missing middle pilot. It's not saying we're going to do one. It's just giving some context to the work that the chief planner is going to be doing.
Oh, okay, so if we move this, if he comes back saying, I don't think it's necessary to spend a year piloting,
That's right.
that you'd be okay with that at that time?
Well, if he comes back, I'm going to take the advice of staff. So
Okay.
if he comes back and says, actually, we shouldn't do any pilots, or we shouldn't do any of this, or we should do more of this,
We
I'm
can't
going to be
proceed.
looking to our chief planner to provide guidance and direction.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Thank you for the clarification, Madam.
Thanks for your support.
Robinson, you would like a clarification?
Yes, thank you. So I just want to clarify that you want to run the pilot in your ward only. That's your objective?
Again, I'm looking to provide context for the recommendations or for the report to have a contextual relevancy. What I wouldn't do is call for a pilot in your ward or anyone else's ward, and I would encourage, if anyone else is interested to see what that looks like in their ward, that's something that you can bring forward. But I would never, call for something like that in somebody else's community.
Okay.
I think that having the context for this direction to actually having the geographical context is helpful.
So I just wonder, have you ever experienced a stretch of a neighborhood in my ward north of Lawrence? It's an example of a pilot, north of Lawrence on Bayview, which is transitioned from single-family dwellings to townhouses.
Yep.
Have you ever visited that stretch of Bayview where
Often.
the residents are very unhappy about this?
I haven't spoken with the residents, but I have ridden up Bayview that stretch often.
So my question, I guess, is: are you aware of the price points of those? So it does, in a sense, been a pilot where it's transitioned. Are you aware of the price points of those townhouses?
Those are expensive townhouses.
Right. So I guess how would you see this pilot addressing affordability, which really is at the core of the issue? I mean,
So just
that's
to
what I'm
be
struggling
clear,
with.
there's not a pilot. There is a request for opportunities to look at one.
Mm-hmm.
How does this address affordability? Well, what you're looking at is different options. So townhouses could be part of that. Semis could be part of that, duplexes, triplexes. I don't want to prejudice the information that's going to come back from staff, but I would say you can look at jurisdictions across North America right now, particularly in the U.S., on the West Coast. They are all taking a look at that, and I think that's why it's important that the City of Toronto shows some leadership on that file, and we look at all the options, and then we consider them as a council, we consider them as a community, and we try and chart a path forward.
Okay, thank you for your
Thanks very
answer.
much.
Okay, members, got to get moving. Councillor Bailao?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think part of the intention of the motion is actually to start the conversation that we're starting right here in this Council of Chambers, and acknowledge that there's going to be some challenges, acknowledge that we have a big city that has very different neighborhoods that we need to take in consideration, that, this is not the panacea that is going to solve all the housing issues, being affordable or not affordable. There's the discussions that need to happen, but it is an acknowledgement that we need to talk about 70% of the land in this city. And it's also an acknowledgement that people are living differently nowadays. They lived differently in the 30s, they lived differently in the 60s and 70s, and they're living differently today. I remember when I first came to Canada, around my neighborhood, most people had 2-3 apartments in their houses. Nowadays, most families are coming in, they're taking down those apartments and doing single-family homes. But a lot of them are also saying, no, we actually want to continue to live in the neighborhood. So how can we protect some of that stock? Can we have small walk-ups that can be done as well? So how do you actually address the different ways that people are living when you have 70% of the land that you can barely touch, with over 2 million bedrooms empty, that we also have an aging population that we have to bring into this equation, with a whole lot of housing stock in there that we need to bring to the conversation? So I think this is the beginning of an interesting conversation that we need to have in the city, but it is something that it is happening. And what concerns me the most is that a lot of us have these in our areas, and a lot of us say, no, we can't deal with this, wink, wink, it's not happening in my area. And then we hear of stories that go to Committee of Adjustments, for example, a triplex in Scarborough that was not approved at Committee of Adjustment, even though it had 40 letters of support from that community. And what had happened? They have to dehouse one of the families that live there, take a door out, so it becomes legal. And let me tell you about the last couple of weeks, just in my area. So one street had a body shop. Body shop closes down. The owner comes and says, I'm interested in doing a small walk-up with 12 apartments. You know what he's told? No, sever the land and do 2 semis to fit with the character of the neighborhood. This is 12 rental apartments. Next, Dufferin Street, 300 meters north of Dufferin Station. Small walk-up, 8 units. You know what he's told? He needs 7 parking spots. Can't do it. Next one, at Committee of Adjustment 2 days ago, 1 variance, a front entrance to the basement. You know what we did? We did a report to refuse that unit. This is in my area. Dufferin Street, a body shop, if you call that character of the neighborhood, and a basement apartment. Together, you're talking about 21 units that we could easily have it, that people can live in our neighborhoods. Because for me, I think it becomes also a matter of equity. Because a lot of people, and I say this about myself, I wouldn't be able to afford my house today. I have a basement apartment, and that helps, with the expenses. And a lot of families like ours look back and saying, you know what, I would love to have my kids living in here, I could do a laneway housing, I have my aging parents that could do a triplex. We need to understand that these challenges exist, that we have 70% of our city that has this land, that people are thinking about, you know what, I could actually use it to live in a different way, that I would be okay with it. So let's acknowledge that. Let's have these conversations with our residents. Let's start that conversation, because people are feeling these challenges. So can we cooperate? Can we make it that it's easier? Can the city be part of the solution with them? It's not imposing on them, but it's saying, we understand that there's different ways to live in our city. We understand that people want to keep living in their neighborhoods. They want their kids to be able to live in their neighborhoods. And if that is to happen, we can't just think about 80 stories and single-family detached homes. We need to find ways to bring other kind of stock. And that's the conversation that we're going to need to have. Will it have challenges? Absolutely. Land value speculation is an issue. This absolutely will not solve affordable housing. Councillor Perks is absolutely right. I often say this. You cannot solve affordable housing or the housing crisis by building your way out of it, but you can also not doing it by subsidizing your way out of it. You need both these solutions at the table. You need to find ways that you work with the population of Toronto to acknowledge that they have different ways of living, and not wanting to impose it on them, but actually work with them to acknowledge that.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson to speak.
I'm going to try to be brief, Madam Speaker, because I think Councillor Perks and Councillor Fillion have done an excellent job really outlining the issues that I would have highlighted, but I'll quickly go through a few points I want to share with Council. I have 4 developments on this agenda, most of them at Yonge and Eglinton, one of them at Leaside. I can't believe what we've gone through in just trying to secure a little bit of green space for a park, for green infrastructure, to save a few trees, to make a neighbourhood livable, like Leaside and Yonge and Eglinton. The crosstown impact, as much as this is an exciting asset for the city, is unbelievable. And I spend most of my evenings, as do many of my colleagues, at planning meetings. I have 25 ratepayers associations in Ward 15, and that number seems to be growing. And I'm going to use the example of these 4 developments that we have before us today. 2 of them have passed, 2 of them still have to. But if you knew the price tag of some of these condos, and quite frankly some of the rental, I'm still trying to find out some of the rentals, you would actually be, I don't even know how to describe it when I found out the amounts that people are paying for these. It's not even in the 2 and 3 million, it's way above that. So I think this is not a discussion about stock or supply. This is a discussion about affordability, or that should be the discussion. And I'm going to use Bayview Avenue again as an example. As I shared with Councillor Bradford, there was a development just north of Lawrence on Bayview. It was 8-10 years ago. Planners were against it. The OMB voted it in. And that created the horse came out of the barn. There was no way to close the barn doors. And so there's been a ripple effect, a domino effect up Bayview Avenue. I want you to go and drive there someday when you have a chance and look at those townhouses and tell me if that's helping affordability. Most of them are actually sitting empty, but tell me if that's helping affordability. We've lost the single-family dwelling to these townhouses. The neighbours are very upset, but I don't think that's helping. And I can't help but really duplicate what Councillor Perks said about the UN rep that came to planning and housing and clearly stated Toronto does not have a stock or supply issue. It's affordability. So I think this is worrisome on many levels, which Councillor Fillion pointed out. One, I think it will drive up land values immediately, tomorrow. The other thing I think that I'm very concerned about is the signal we're sending to our appeal bodies, whether it's TLAB or LPAT or whatever it's going to be in the future, no one knows, thanks to the provincial government. But even TLAB, I've heard recently members of TLAB saying that they've been hearing what City Council is talking about in planning and housing, and they're being a bit more loose with the rules. So I'm concerned about our impact on our official plan, our zoning bylaw. I like Councillor Fillion, I don't understand the impacts. And you know, what worries me is Build Toronto is tweeting up a storm about how exciting this is. BLD, when I say build. So I just, I think it's very important that we consult with our ratepayers and residents associations and community associations, BIAs. There's not much green space left in my ward. It's almost all gray and concrete. And while I understand I have 3 sons who want to live in this city, and I really get the title of this motion, I really love the title of this motion, I don't think the body of the motion reflects what the title says. So I think it's a very yummy title, and I want to also work on this, but I'm not sure this is the way forward, and I think actually this is a slippery slope.
Okay, if we can ring the bells, please. We're ready to vote. We have an amendment by Councillor Fillion. It's on the screen. I'm sorry, Councillor Perks?
On a point of order, Councillor Fillion said that he wanted to change the word homeowner to community.
Yes.
Community associations.
Yes.
Registered community association.
So you've changed it? Okay. Okay. Recorded vote? Okay, recorded vote.
The amendment carries unanimously, 22 in favor.
Okay, item as amended. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bradford's amendment. Recorded vote.
Councillor Lai, please.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
The amendment carries 19 to 3.
Item as amended. Recorded vote.
Councillor Cressy, Councillor Thompson, please, and Councillor Matlow.
Councillor, thank you. Oh, Councillor Wong Tam, please.
The item as amended carries 20 to 3.
Okay. Councillor Perks, your motion is ready for your item? Okay, if we can put Councillor Perks' motion on the screen, please. Okay, just, okay, there you go.
So, Speaker, thank you. This is going back to the item we began the day with. If you recall, during questioning, the Chief Financial Officer said that it was her intention to bring the report described here to Council before we consider the 2020 budget. So, in fact, all I'm really doing here is recording a Council direction for what the Public Service has told us they intend to do anyway. My experience has been that on these long-term financial planning matters, that you know, events overtake us, the province does something crazy, and all of a sudden our agenda gets full. I just want to make sure that it's clear that we as a council want to see the work that the consultants at Ernst & Young are doing about how we manage our finances going forward before we do the budget debate in 2020. It's worth remembering, you know, we do our first budget at our, you know, one of our first meetings. Our second budget we'll have done half of the spending for this term of council without the benefit of a long-term financial plan or long-term financial planning advice unless we see this report before we do the 2020 budget debate. So this is following what staff said they intend to do anyway, and merely putting it on record so that events don't overtake us, so that we don't lose it, so there's a clear direction from council that we need to understand the long-term financial implications of our budget planning before we cement the 2020 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so 14. So if we can put the motion up for item EX 7.14 by Councillor Perks. It's on the screen. All in favor? Carried. Recorded. Okay, can you please, Councillor Holliday, like say it louder and in advance? Like you're always doing it in the middle of the vote.
Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Layton, and Councillor Bailao, please.
Councillor Robinson, please.
Councillor Bailao, please.
The amendment carries 22-1.
On EX 7.15, EX 7.15, item is amended, all in favor, carried. EX 7.15, on the item, all in favor, carried. EX 7.18, on the item, all in favor, carried. Our next item is on page 2, EC 6.4 on Children's Services for 2019 federal and provincial budget. Councillor Cressy.
Speaker?
Yes.
Just for clarification, I thought we were going to be dealing on the timed items with 6.4 and then 6.5, as they're both childcare related. And I see here in the item, in the order of items, it says just 0.64.
That's all that was proposed.
Oh. Is it possible to request, because I think this should be quick, like
Well,
one follows the other. Is it possible to request the
yeah,
will of committee to
actually-
deal with them?
Actually, I agree with you, so why don't we deal with 6 and 4? Okay. Yeah, move by, all in favor. Okay, Councillor Cressy, do you want to speak on this item?
You have questions?
Or we're doing 2 items. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, Councillor Cressy to speak. You held the item down.
Thank you, Speaker. So as we are dealing with 6.4 and 6.5 together, as I understand it, I have an amendment, if it can be placed on the screen, dealing with item 6.5 on the occupancy grants. If I could start, first of all, by thanking our staff in Children's Services, as this has been a very difficult 6 months, and given the uncertain time that we're in on childcare.
Can we put the motion on the screen?
Sorry, I thought it was placed. And I'll speak to the amendment in the course of my remarks. Councillor Layton and I, a number of other councillors, joined us, had a press conference the other day talking about the matter of childcare. And I will admit, and I said at that time, that I've spoken of childcare often, but for the first time in my life, this has become a deeply personal issue. Because like many of you around this chamber, and like many others, Grace and I are soon to join the ranks of being parents. We're having our firstborn in November. And I'll tell you, we found out at around 5 weeks, before, declare a conflict, before we told a single person, before we told our parents or our best friends or our siblings, we went and registered ourselves for childcare lists. It was the very first thing we did. We found out and we went and put ourselves on numerous childcare lists. Because we're worried about finding a space. We both work. And I'm not sure if we're going to get a space. And then the second thing we did after putting ourselves on those lists was look at the fees that are required for infant and toddler childcare. And like all of you in this chamber, I am incredibly lucky and privileged to have a good paying full-time job. And my spouse works as well. And when we went and looked at the childcare fees, that if we get a space we will be paying, after household costs, other expenses, and everything else, we will be going into a line of credit to pay for childcare. And we're well off. That's the reality, is that in our city now, childcare, well, first of all, it's more expensive than any other city in Canada. And secondly, it's unaffordable for nearly everyone. If you're looking for a subsidy, the waiting list is 15,000, and due to a recent memo we received from the province saying the 2020 cuts are still on board, 6,000 subsidies are at risk. But even if you don't qualify for a subsidy, it's unaffordable. And I believe to my core that childcare should be affordable and accessible for everyone. That's it. Full stop. Childcare should be no different than public school and healthcare, and nobody should ever have to think twice about whether or not to have a child because of the availability and affordability of childcare. And so this provincial government, which did the right thing as it relates to some of the costs that they proposed, the cuts that they proposed to retroactively implement, they did the right thing when they removed that retroactivity. But we've received a memo that says that the cuts are still on for 2020. The cuts that are going to impact more than 6,000 subsidies are still on. And we've also now heard that the previous commitment by the provincial government to provide funding for 3,000 new spaces in 51 childcare centres, that capital funding is now at risk unless we come up with the operating dollars, $34 million. And that's just unacceptable. It's flat out unacceptable. As a soon-to-be parent, I can't accept that, but I think as a resident of the city, none of us should accept that. Now, my motion here speaks to another issue on the childcare discussion, and that's the occupancy grants. 349 childcare spaces located in 4 school boards across our city have received occupancy grants since 1998. And if those occupancy grants are lost, that puts in jeopardy the childcare fees for 18,400 kids. And given the unaffordability of childcare, given the lack of accessibility to childcare, as a member of this council, I simply cannot accept telling parents of 18,400 kids that effective January 1st, their childcare fees will go up, their rates will go up. And so the demand here, and I will be supporting Councillor Layton's amendment shortly, is first of all that we don't just work with the province to hold the status quo so that we continue to have a large waiting list and a lack of childcare spaces, but rather to invest more. This isn't about reversing proposed cuts. This is actually about building a system of childcare across all 3 levels of government that ensure that just like healthcare and just like education, if you're going to have a kid, you don't have to worry about whether a space will be there for you or whether you'll be able to afford it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I have a motion that one, City Council reiterate to the province that the goals of the childcare growth strategy require operating funding for sustainable childcare growth. 2, that City Council request the province to provide operating funding to support the 51 childcare capital projects that are at risk of not proceeding. 3, if the province refuses to extend the submission deadline, City Council requests the City Manager to inform the Ministry of Children and Youth Services that the City remains interested in receiving capital funding, and City requests the General Manager of Children's Services to bring forward a financing option report to the October 8 meeting of the Budget Committee. 4, City Council requests the General Manager of Children's Services to work with the TDSB to identify locations for new facilities which have demonstrated demand and potential for financial viability. 5, City Council requests the Mayor and Deputy City Manager, Community and Social Services to meet with the Honourable Geneviève Duclos, Minister of Family, Children and Social Development, to discuss the possibility of additional federal funding to support the operating costs associated with 51 planned childcare centres. 3,000 childcare spots is what the province is cutting here. 3,000 new childcare spots that were planned, that the city had identified need for, and that the province had committed to paying the operating funding for, operating support for, that at the end of April, they wrote us a letter that's, sorry, thank you, Councillor Thompson, 3,049, that the province wrote us a letter at the end of April saying, if you can't show us the money in 2 months for the long-term operating costs, the $34 million that's needed over the course of implementing those spots, if you can't show that to us by the end of August, those spots aren't happening. We're not helping you out in building those. Those 3,000 spots that are being cut by the province are on top of the occupancy grants, which will cost each family about $300 more a year if their kid's in a TDSB facility, daycare. That's a 12% property tax increase on average to those parents. That's on top of the changes to the subsidy formula. That puts at risk 6,000 new subsidies to help send the kids of low-income families and middle-income families to daycare so that they can return to work. That's on top of the cuts to training for childcare workers for children with special needs. This government just keeps dumping on the kids of Toronto. In every ward will see cuts, and the numbers will go up. In Etobicoke North, in Doug Ford's own riding, where they have a wait list of 741 families, 741 families for subsidies for their daycare, they're going to lose 455 under the change in the formula that the province has done. And if parents are on the wait list, they're going to be waiting even longer now. Now Joe's just waiting for that call and crossing his fingers that he's going to get that call. But I can tell my friend Councillor Cressy that from experience, we waited until the 11th month of my partner's parental leave to find out we had a spot. Imagine the anxiety, the family planning we were having to do to try to figure out how to juggle zero childcare if my partner had to go back, or the loss of her income if my partner had to go back to work and we didn't have daycare. We would have had to find a private nanny to come in at that expense and go through the process of identifying that individual and not having the benefit of having our little Phoebe actually get the experience of classroom learning, of that group play that daycare provides. We A, couldn't have afforded it, and B, we weren't prepared for that because we had thought we had a daycare spot coming. Now, we were fortunate. We got that call at the 11th month and got her into care. And trust me, like Councillor Cressy, we were on that list right when we found out that we were going to be parents. And parents are experiencing this all across our city.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Councillor Ains, do you have a clarification question?
I do. Through you, Madam Speaker. Could I just see the motion on the screen? I just wanted to ask Councillor about number 3 in the motion. My understanding of, so we're looking at financing options from the province. If we're trying to negotiate with the province, do you think that's taking leverage away that we need to have?
Well, the reality is the province has said if we don't reply by the end of August, we won't get the funding. And the hope here is we're going to ask for the money, then we're going to ask for an extension. And if they refuse both, that we say we're still committed to building these spaces, we're going to find the money to make it work. But we have to get that capital financing.
Right.
If not, the only option is to say, okay, we're not going to have those 51 centers.
Okay.
So there's an escalation here. It's saying, province, it's important to provide the operating funding. You should provide that. 2, province, if you don't provide the operating funding, these centers are at risk. 3, saying if you won't extend the deadline, we need to find a way to keep these moving. The fact is, we just don't have time. We don't have time to go to them and then ask them to come back before the end of August to say and express our commitment to figuring out how we're going to fund them in the case that the province doesn't.
Okay, you don't see it as bad negotiating. We're basically saying that, if you don't come to the table, we're going to do this anyway.
Look, we simply don't have a choice at this stage because of the deadline they gave us of the end of August. There's not an opportunity for a back and forth here, and frankly, the staff need to go down and present this to I believe, to the ministry later today to say, what are you doing?
Right. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Councillor. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I will rise and speak in support of the motions that have been put forward by my colleagues, and also to lend my voice to the fact that we do need universally accessible childcare. And it's not just about the 51 childcare facilities that are at risk, or perhaps the 3,449 spots that we will lose. It's the fact that Toronto is the child poverty capital of Canada, and that we have the most expensive childcare program across the country. It's much bigger than this conversation, although we are having this particular debate today about what is the province doing to us now. There have been times where the province has stepped up under the previous Liberal government I can think of, where they wanted to actually fund additional childcare. What they've said is that they needed the city to step up. And I remember in this chamber, we had a big fight over whether or not the city would then be able to pony up some additional cash to meet some of those provincial financial commitments. But let's go a little bit higher than all of that. Let's just go much, much higher into the air, and let's talk about what does a universal national child care program look like. And really, this is where we can set the conversation and put into place when the federal election is underway, when the writ is dropped, when all the platforms from the parties are released. How do we fix this problem once and for all? And to me, that is a much more interesting conversation because it's about trying to address the structural inequalities that exist for women and their families when they do not have access to accessible, affordable childcare. In province of Quebec, you can get childcare for $2,600 annually under the $7 a day program. In the previous federal government, there was an election pledge that you could get childcare for $15 a day nationally, and that would cost a family $5,500. Whenever we've had a chance to change the political discussion at that level, at the national level, and make commitments to actually do right by Canadian families to make sure that we can actually provide childcare, every single time it has fallen apart. And while we are here struggling to make sure we don't let down these 3,049 families that are expecting these childcare spaces, let us not kid ourselves that even if we are able to fix this gap this coming year, we are going to be placed in the same position over and over again unless we get to a national, universally accessible childcare program. And that means Canada must commit to a minimum of 1% of the GDP to providing that universally accessible childcare. So therefore, families who need childcare, regardless of where they are, they will be able to access that. So right now, we are actually trying to fix what the provincial government has done unilaterally. Once again, announce something that's going to happen to Toronto, but let us not lose our eye on the prize, and that is there is a federal election coming up. If you don't want to have this debate ever again, if you want to make sure that families in Toronto have childcare, and that means that women in particular, and it's important for us to recognize that it is also a gender issue. It will have a gendered impact. Women are going to be disproportionately affected without accessible childcare. It is a catch-22. Women are going to will be forced to stay home. They will be forced to give up their promising careers. They will be forced to not contribute to the economic measured culture of society because of women's work and child work and caregiving work is not valued domestically. We don't put a value on that GDP. So I would only encourage us, not only do we send a loud message to the province, but also to make sure that we take this enthusiasm, this energy that we have to fight the province to get what's ours, is that we actually take this energy and the passion and make sure that childcare is a ballot box issue in October. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailão.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm just going to follow up on the comments from Councillor Wong Tam, because I think that we need to speak louder on this continual, forceful downloading of responsibilities that keeps happening to the City of Toronto. I think that we had, I do have a motion. I'm not sure if it's ready. Sorry.
Okay, Councillor, apparently you just gave it to the clerk.
Well, I gave it this morning. Yeah.
Pardon? No, I know. I'm talking to the councillor. You just gave that motion.
I didn't. Just gave it. They've been working on it, and I can stand down. There's another speaker.
Councillor Carroll, did you want to speak on this? Your name's on the screen.
I did. I'm sorry. I thought Councillor Bailão was going to be a little longer.
Well, she didn't have her motion.
Oh, I don't have a motion.
Councillor Carroll?
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I'm not moving anything. I just wanted to rise in support of the motions and particularly Councillor Cressy's motion that says not only do we need to maintain the occupancy grant from now until the 2020 budget process. But it's time for staff to learn that council, again and again, has voted that we don't want to destabilize the full fee paying parent using this measure. We're simply going to have to find other ways. Madam Speaker, I'm not sure why the provincial government does want to destabilize childcare. I kind of do understand why other orders of government struggle with housing. Because many times a family gets on a housing list and now they're on it for a lifetime, multi-generationally. I don't understand it with childcare. The beauty of childcare is that families move in and out of it. Children grow. And now you can serve other children. There's no such thing as a legacy kid who moves into childcare and never leaves. That would drive a government to think, how do I somehow make my way out of this? Families move out and in of it, and we're able to renew this service for new families. It's a good news story for any order of government. I don't know why the province wants to yank themselves out of this one, but they do. I have an inkling, though. And it's in this offer in the first item, Madam Speaker, to say to the city, build this capital, or we're going to say, well, we would have liked to have built these centres, we would have liked to have developed more spaces, but the city said no. Build this capital. Oh, by the way, as a sidebar, we're not going to help you operate it once it's done. What they would like you to do, they'd like us to take public money and build space, and then by pulling out of operating, leave us with all this space that ends up needing to be privatized inside public facilities and schools. And you lose control of that point, of the quality of the child care, the quality of life of the people who care for your children, and the system as a whole. The ability to set a bar of quality, which is what the community has told us for decades now they want. That ability for us on a municipal level in the public sector to set a bar of quality for our children, just as we do in their education system, slowly goes away. If we think about it, that could be the only reason why they would offer, please let us build these centres, but no, not operate them. And we know you don't have the money to operate them either. That's the only real rational explanation. So where we can, with an amount of money as small as the total envelope of the occupancy grant, why would we engage in the destabilization? All that does, all that would do is feed into what we can see from their actions this provincial government would love, for us to be arguing with the school board. Two beggars fighting over the crumbs as they pull out of a system that we know that the community and every family in this community wants them to stay in. We know that. And so, at the very least, we've got to keep those occupancy grants. But really what we ought to be doing is calling them out for what they're doing when they say, take public funds and build some facilities, and then we'll refuse to run them. We'll refuse to put children in them. We know damn well what the agenda is, and we need to name that agenda and make sure that all of the families know that's what's going on. When I say families, I mean every generation of a family. Not having a subsidized childcare space for a grandchild when it was needed meant that money started to flow out of my account. Just as Councillor Layton uses his own personal experience, Councillor Cressy uses his future personal experience to say, this hits me in a way I think it's hitting other families. I know there are 60-year-olds in this room and 70-year-olds at home that know that their grandchildren, their children, are only living a quality of life because when you abandon childcare, the entire family at every generational level ends up having to pass the hat just so that we can keep mom and dad in our economy. And the province needs to own up to the fact that they're not trying to keep mom and dad in our economy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Bylaw, do you have your motion ready yet? Well, do you want to ask? Okay, because we're trying to get these items done. Councillor Crawford, to speak?
Yeah, thank you,
Okay,
Madam.
hold on, it is ready. Come on, members, we want to get the agenda complete today. Like, if you have motions, bring them to the staff way in advance so they can have it ready. Councillor Baila, to speak.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. And my motion, as I was saying, is very much in line with what Councillor Christian Wong Tam was saying, that we do need the province and the federal government to take a key role and partnering on this. We continuously get downloaded with these responsibilities, and I think they are in conversations, they are negotiating their agreement. I don't know how well things are going, but I think it is important that our city manager asks our federal counterparts. I spoke to staff. There's a big question mark on what's going to happen after March 2020, so the pressure in this matter might be even worse than what we think, because we don't have a provincial-federal agreement that it is in place after March 2020. So if the pressures that we're feeling right now are bad, they can get even worse. So I think we need to start talking with our federal partners. We need to ask them for the priorities that are really important to us. This is another issue that our families in Toronto are feeling. When we have, a city that is growing, that people want, are coming here for jobs, and then they can't file childcare, that it's as many families say, almost a second mortgage that they have. Compared to other cities, even in our country, it is one of the most expensive childcare services around the world. I think we need to do something about it. I think this council has committed to be part of the solution, but I think it is time that we push back a bit and saying that our province and provincial and federal government do their part as well. So I'm looking forward to having this report from our city manager.
Thank you, Councillor Bailao. Councillor Crawford? Hang on. There you go.
First of all, I am supportive of the three motions, of course, with Councillor Cressy. I want to thank him for working with him to really put this issue back into the budget process submission where it belongs. With regard to Councillor Layton's motion, I want to thank Councillor Ainsley for the questions that he answered. When we go to vote for this, I will be asking to remove number 3 and vote on that separately, mainly being this undermines our negotiating ability with the province at the moment. From my perspective, the province is now listening to us and will listen to us, and I think there is an opportunity to really push for the sort of funding that we need for the childcare. But again, this undermines our position. We should not be talking about a funding source right now prior to the negotiations finishing. There will be time afterwards to be able to look and deal with number 3, but I think to put that and make that decision premature or prior to any of those discussions that are happening is not going to help us out. In fact, the province could look at that and go, well, they have a funding source, they're going to do it, we'll let them do it. I think we need to put the pressure on. We need to continue to put the pressure on.
Yeah.
Number 3 does not support that. So I'll actually be asking to, I understand the intentions of Councillor Layton, fully understand the intentions of what he's doing, but I think that'll actually won't work in our favor when we're trying to figure out how to get the funding for this. So I'm just going to be asking to remove number 3, and I would ask for your support for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Crawford. Councillor Matlow.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to express my gratitude to Councillors Layton and Cressy for bringing this to the forefront and really pressing us to do something that I don't think any of us want to do, which is to accept another download. But that is what this is. We are being downloaded by the province of Ontario to take on another responsibility that they're not taking ownership over. And it demonstrates that, once again, that we have a dysfunctional governance structure where cities are not empowered with the right revenue tools to be able to support cities' responsibilities. But at the same time, we have a provincial government that has far more ability to raise revenue for the vast array of responsibilities it has, and they're punting those responsibilities off. In fact, one of the biggest sources, or the biggest revenue tools that the province has today is the City of Toronto. I mean, that's what's happened. But But I get that we have to find a Band-Aid. We need to find a way to fill this gap, because if we don't, then who else will? I mean, we're the last one standing. On a personal note, my daughter was born in 2013. And both my wife and I have more than full-time jobs, as you all can understand. Goes into the evenings, going to the weekends. And it took months to get our child, Molly, into a childcare space. And my mom saved us. Like, she just basically just took ownership and was there all the time. And we couldn't have done it without my mom. And soon after, my mom died of cancer 4 years ago. And I can't imagine what we would have done if she wasn't around at that time. I don't have an answer. So much of the work that we do is done through empathy, right? Like, we vote on things and we decide things that often we don't experience in our own lives, but we listen to our residents and we try to empathize with them. We try to understand what their needs are and how to help them, even if we haven't had a lived experience ourselves in the same way. And I hear from so many people, as many of you do as well, who, I have a full-time job and I'm paid well. There's so many people who really do have to decide between, like, whether or not they're going to be able to go to work and pay the rent and feed their family, or if they have to stay home and support their child. And sometimes that's an impossible question to answer. And they're in an awful situation. So I just think it's just devastating that we're in this situation in the first place, that we have to make a decision now, and I think we are, that we are willing to prioritize a provincial responsibility as part of our budget to fill a gap. But the very fact that we're in this situation in the first place is just unacceptable. It's just not right. We've got just a messed up governance structure that has to be remedied, or else we're always going to have these fights. Whether it be planning, whether it be childcare in this case, whether it be transit, whether it be anything we deal with respect to the provincial government, we're just always going to come back to this situation until Toronto is actually empowered to be a level of government that has defined responsibilities for what we do, but I think just as importantly, a clear delineation about the things that we don't do. That's subsidiarity. I think the public want to know who's responsible for what. I pay taxes to that level of government, and then I expect them to provide those services. And if they don't provide those services, then we hold them to account during election. But right now, it's just so easy to do this. It's actually commonplace, right? If you went to the average person on the street and said, who's responsible for childcare? Who's responsible for transit? Who's responsible for housing? Who's responsible for planning? They think it might be us. It's largely the province. Some of it's the federal government. I don't know. We just keep coming back to this over and over and over again, and this can't keep going on this way. I'll conclude again just by thanking my colleagues for bringing to this, the forefront. I want to thank Councillor Crawford and the Mayor for, being open to. I know it's hard when we're dealing with these, difficult budgets to kind of fill in even more, but I think it's necessary because I think we all know that if we didn't do this, there'd be countless families out there that would just be at a loss as to what to do, and we're doing what we can to help.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Speaker, I just wanted to rise and lend my voice to this issue. This matter came to committee and was dealt with there. The staff and the DCM, I want to certainly thank them for the work that they have actually been doing, because there's a lot of work that's been done trying to get the province to the table to live up to their undertaking and to ensure that the 3,049 young people and children who would be impacted by a lack of decision on the province in terms of moving forward on this particular matter will be addressed. I'm happy that we are and certainly would discuss this issue that came from committee here at Council, because this is actually that body that makes the final decision in terms of how we deal with these particular issues. There's no doubt in my mind that it is very critical for us here at Council to ensure that the challenges that we're experiencing in terms of our relationship with the province, particularly as it relates to childcare, will in fact be addressed by us. At the end of the day, we realize that there are pressures and impact to us in terms of our budgets and so on. But at the end, the end of the day, I think that it's important to understand the societal impact to parents and to families in our cities. It has certainly personal impact, but it also has economic impact as well. We heard Councillor Cressy talked about the cost of daycare and that it is the highest in our city. It's the highest anywhere in the country. Quebec has their special plan. I still don't know how that plan works. I know that we've asked in the past in terms of how is it possible for them to be able to offer $7 a day daycare in Quebec, and we're not able to offer that here in the province of Ontario, the largest province, the province that is the engine of the Canadian economy. And so it has far-reaching impact. It has impact as well to the very children that we are tasked with the responsibility in terms of protecting and ensuring that their welfare and their development is assured and enhanced in a society that is as rich as we are. And so it's unfortunate that the political meandering and the political gamesmanship that is the process that we're going through now has this potential impact and that has far-reaching impact that families will suffer if we don't find means to be able to help them. And I think that we have an obligation to help them. I hope and trust that the province will ensure or support this extension of the deadline from August to October so that we could talk this through. We had a really good system of expectation on the 51 sites that we were looking at bringing forward, and I realized that they weren't all going to happen all at once, but nonetheless we had a process. Every one of our wards, I think in my ward, the number of childcare spaces that are impacted is about 548. There's a significant, so in Scarborough alone, there's over 1,500 of them. And so it's a huge impact to people who are already challenged. So we cannot certainly just stand idly by and do nothing about this. So every effort that we can actually make to make an impact on this particular issue must be done, and I think we have an obligation to do that. So I continue to call on the province actually to do more and to come to the table to work in a reasonable fashion so that we can protect what is, in my view, important asset in our society, which is our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Layton.
Order? Personal privilege order? I'm looking at you.
Point of order.
I'd like to make a point. In the interest of us having a united voice with respect to discussions with the province, I've worked out a small amendment to motion number 3, or motion to number 3, and that's to delete the second half and instead use the language continuing discussion to receive capital funding. I'm hopeful that this would, that taking this direction demonstrate our desire to protect as much capital funding as possible in the discussions with the province, at the same time ensuring that we are moving ahead with as much as possible in the way of our own contribution.
Okay, so Councillor Layton wants to amend his revising his motion. Yeah. Okay, all in favor? Amending, he's going to amend. Yes. Okay, last speaker, Mayor Tory.
Well, Madam Speaker, may I begin by thanking Councillor Layton for making that amendment, which I think will make sure that our negotiating position is, or if you want to call it that, I don't know why we should have to be negotiating these things, but our position is maintained and kept as strong as it can be, and also to him and to Councillor Cressy and others for bringing this matter in front of us today. Was here, I guess, for other reasons to do with the occupancy grants and so on. Councillor Matlow just said something that is actually so true in terms of where we find ourselves. And it's true of a number of these issues. If no one is responsible, then no one is responsible. And that is part of the problem here. But we have cobbled together over the years, and I guess it's the story of Canadian Confederation in some respects, not just Ontario and Toronto. We've cobbled together these partnerships over the years on things, mostly to do with funding, because it is recognized, and I repeat something I said, I forget, in a different context yesterday. Property taxes were never meant to pay for social programs. They were meant to pay for the many, so I'll call them harder services, that we are responsible for delivering to people. But we've worked out over the years a variety of partnerships. In this case, there has been one of long-standing, it's been referred to here today, on childcare, where we agreed to share some of these costs. And what's happening here is that for reasons arising out of financial circumstances, I understand, they have chosen, they've made a choice that one of the areas where they will try and deal with that financial problem is by just blowing up, in effect, this partnership and saying, well, we're really not part of this to the same extent, or going forward, we're going to just say you're on your own. And, I just think that's wrong. I said that the other day. I repeat it here. It's just not the right choice. I believe I was speaking this morning at the launch of the Elevate Tech Conference, something we can be very proud of that's going to be bigger than ever this year, and it celebrates the success of our tech community. And I said, one of the reasons why we're a magnet for smart people from around the world, and frankly, one of the reasons why we will be able to say to these young children that are the ones that will be in the childcare that they have nothing but a life of opportunity here in Toronto, is because we have a great system of education in which there has been a continued investment in that by different governments over time, because it's been recognized it's the best investment we could make. Well, close behind on that list, if not tied, is childcare, because in a way it all fits together. And I look at it as there being in all of these instances a moral case and a business case. And if people don't accept the moral case that we want to make it possible for everybody to seek out the opportunity that I'm referring to, whether it's in tech or film or teaching or policing or wherever you want, that we have an obligation to sort of help make that possible for people by addressing one of the most difficult challenges they face in being able to go out and pursue opportunity, whether it be a man or a woman, namely to address the childcare issue, then let's go to the business case. And the business case says if we want to have a growing, successful city, we simply have to make it possible for people to go out and work. And it's for a number of reasons. I remember being out in Scarborough not long ago. I think Councillor Thompson was there. And we went to a childcare centre, and we were there to illustrate the negative effects of these very cutbacks that we're here talking about today. And a woman was there with us who was there as a user of that childcare centre, and she said very simply that if you end up in a situation where I'm either going to have to pay a lot more because I lose a subsidy or because the rates go way up, I will be in a position where I will have to stay home because we can't afford it. But she said, there's more. There's more. I'm not just going to have to stay home and deny myself the career that I want to have, but, and by the way, I would say that what carries with it, when she's out working, earning a salary, she's paying income taxes to the very same provincial government and the federal government, which she wouldn't be paying if she wasn't working. But she made the further point that if she had to stay home because she couldn't find or couldn't afford childcare, they would then probably not be able to afford to keep their house because they wouldn't be able to make their mortgage payments. And she said they would then have to move out of the city. Now, what kind of a state of affairs is that going to be for the future of the city, just looking at it on a business case basis, if people can't find childcare, can't work, and therefore can't pay tax on the income they earn if they're working, but also then, even worse than all of that, they have to move out of the city of Toronto. They just find the city not a place where they can pursue their lives and pursue their careers. And so what this is all meant to do today is to give us a chance, and we've initiated some discussions with the government about this in the aftermath of the skirmish, or whatever one wants to call it, that we were having, and they sort of put this stuff on hold. And we're going to have to try and talk to them and try and convince them of these points. And really the most important one of all is that we had a partnership. We had a partnership which had worked for quite a long time. And we're just saying, don't blow up that partnership, because we shouldn't be and can't pick up the entire responsibility for that on our own, and we shouldn't, more importantly, than whether we can't. And so I thank those who, especially Councillor Layton, who made a change to make sure that this gives us a good platform from which to go to these, to the government and have this discussion with them, and hopefully either the moral and or the business case will be successful in causing us to be in a better place when we next meet. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, so we're ready to vote. We're going to deal with EC 6.4 first, which will be, the first motion would be Councillor Layton's motion. Put it on the screen. Okay, recorded.
Councillor Matlow, please.
Councillor Perks, please.
The amendment carries unanimously, 21 in favor.
Motion 3 by Councillor Bailao. Did you want a recorded vote? Recorded vote.
Councillor Matlow, please.
The amendment carries unanimously, 22 in favor.
Okay, item is amended. Recorded vote.
Councillor Layton, please.
The item is amended, carries unanimously, 22 in favor.
Okay, on EC 6.5, we have a motion by Councillor Cressy. All in favor? Recorded.
Councillor Holyday and Councillor Matlow, please.
Mayor Tory, please.
The amendment carries unanimously, 22 in favor.
Item as amended, recorded vote.
Councillor McKelvey, please. Councillor Matlow.
Councillor Perruzza, please.
The item is amended, carries 21 to 1.
Okay. So members, we do have 3 members' motions that we would like to introduce. 2. Okay, we added 1. So that was Councillor Cressy, right? Councillor Cressy,
Sorry?
Members' motion?
you have a member's motion?
Yes, thank you. My local police division asked that we bring this forward on an objection on a liquor license in light of a shooting that took place at the location a week ago. And the deadline for comment is next week.
All in favor? Carried. Councillor Cole.
Yes, this is in result of the flooding we had yesterday, unprecedented 30 80 millimeters of rain, and this, if we don't act quickly, it could really impact about 700 jobs.
Okay, on favor? Carried. Okay, members, before we go to the next item, I would just like to ask, are there any items that members of council would like to release? Any release of holds? Councillor Ainsley.
Madam Speaker, I can release an item. I have a motion, but it is the actual, it's the next item. I can do it as a quick release.
Which one?
The strengthening the night economy.
Okay. What about the others? You don't have any more that you want to release?
No, we have one on the community benefits. I don't think we're.
You're not
ready on
there yet? Okay, Councillor Cressy?
Thank you, Speaker. I can release item MM 9.65, request to the Government of Canada on the sale of 200 Queens Quay West.
Okay, that was just circulated. It's on your desk. We introduced it this morning. On favor? Carried. Any more? Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I can release with a motion, amended motion, SC 7.7 that was just circulated. This came from staff, worked with staff on the amendment.
Oh, that's the one that you reopened this
Yeah,
morning?
so we reopened it, it was circulated, and I have an amended motion from staff.
Okay, so if we can put the amendment on the screen. There it is. On favor? Carried. Councillor Wong Tam.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. On page 3, EC 6.18, implementing the Region Park Social Development Plan. I can release that. I also just wanted to thank staff, in particular John Smith from SDFA, who worked very quickly to ensure that we were able to extend the funding for the coordinator position for the social development finance role that this individual has in making sure that the revitalization efforts of Region Park are going to truly incorporate the needs of the families that are there. And it also includes, of course, making sure that as we move through phases 4 and 5, which is really what brings us to the completion of the entire revitalization, is that the individual members who are in the community feel heard, that they are going to implement the social planning elements of Region Park and not just necessarily the gleaming new glass towers, which I think has been a primary focus thus far. So this is a critical piece for the local community, and I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On the item, on favor? Carried. Any more? Oh, Councillor Wong Tam. Councillor Robinson, she has a number of them. Is she around? Councillor Wong Tam?
Yes, thank you very much. I can also release, Madam Speaker, on page 6, the designation of the St. Lawrence Neighbourhood Conservation District under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There is a confidential attachment that's contained. I will be happy to release both.
Okay, on page 6, CC 9.25, Councillor Wong Tam is releasing with a confidential report. On favor? Carried. Any more? All right. Councillor Ainsley, we'll start your item, page 2, EC 6.8.
Madam Speaker, I do have a motion. I wanted to do this as a quick release, and staff are still finessing it, I understand.
Staff got it ready? Okay, a few minutes?
It's not controversial, Madam Speaker. The chair, the general manager of economic development have all seen it. It's just finessed. Wordsmithing.
Appoint Paul to...
Are you tweeting again?
Okay, Councillor, were you supposed to be sending some information to staff on it?
I did. I sent it to the center table email account.
Okay, well, let's just give it a few minutes. Sir Robinson? Jeez. Okay. Yes, because we'd like to get some of these items dealt with. Councillor Thompson, you're next. EC 6.13.
Oh, yes, Speaker. Thank you. This is a quick item. I have a motion, and I think Councillor Cressy, I have two motions on this. If we can just put the motions on the screen, please. And Councillor Cressy has one as well.
Okay.
And that's right, and Councillor Ainsley as well. We just have some quick motions. I don't really want to ask a lot of questions, quite frankly. If we just, this is, pardon?
Does the staff have your motions?
Yes, they do. Yeah, no, it's 6.15. 6.15, yeah. This is a community benefit. Did you have any questions? I mean, it's really easy. Just, yeah, exactly. There's actually 4. Councillor Ainsley has one. I'm moving one for Councillor Ninzi.
Councillor Thompson,
Yes.
we're on 613.
Oh, I thought, oh, I see. Okay, sorry. I was looking at 15. So, yes, Speaker, yeah, it's okay. It's all right, sorry.
613.
So I have some questions of staff, Speaker.
Okay, questions to staff?
I thought we were doing 15.
No.
No worries. Thank you. I was getting bad advice. I know.
Are the staff here?
Yes, they're coming, sir.
Where are they? Oh, there. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. So I wonder if someone can explain to me what is the intent of the this notion of confronting Toronto's action plan to confront anti-black racism. What is the intent of that? What are we trying to do here?
Through the Speaker, the city has spent considerable time working with Black Torontonians to understand the context and the experience of systemic racism experienced by Black Torontonians, and to together identify ways of addressing systemic racism. In essence, the strategy is a plan to do just that.
Right, and we're looking internally with respect to activities, with respect to the report that's in front of us. It is internally driven as such at the moment?
Through the Speaker, absolutely. The first priority as a local government is to ensure that we are fully understanding, equipped, and transparent about addressing the issue of anti-Black racism within our own organization.
And so when we look at the city as a whole, is, I mean, I understand the notion of racism and so on, but is anti-Black racism on the increase? Is it sustained? Is it the way it was maybe 5 years ago? Are we seeing a definite shift, a trend in terms of racism towards Black and other racialized folks in the city of Toronto?
Through the Speaker, that is an incredibly difficult question to answer in a very short period of time.
You have your colleague to your left. Would she be able to help me?
The reporting of incidents has been increasing, and that is of great concern.
Right.
That may be a reflection that people are more able to report.
Okay. Which is a good thing.
Which is a very good thing.
Right, right. And so what's the next step in terms of moving forward with respect to this report? Yesterday I asked that we expand this into the TTC matter that we discussed yesterday. I'm just wondering, moving forward, when we, we're looking, this is an internal report that talks about what we're doing as a city, but we also have our ABCs and other agencies as well. Are we looking at expanding this reach into those areas as well?
Through the speaker, yes, we are. We are doing a lot of work within the city, within divisions and agencies and commissions as we speak. With regards to external, we get calls, and we are doing the best that we can to respond to those requests for support.
Right. And in your report, you talk about things like, the number of black children living in poverty compared to non-racialized children and so on. How will this report, as it relates to the city and internal document, be brought forward into the broader city context in terms of dealing with this particular issue? We were talking about children earlier on in another matter, but young black children, how will we address this issue that's very problematic in terms of those who are living in poverty?
So when we developed the action plan, this action plan was informed by Black community with specific actions for addressing the issues of poverty among young Black children. So we're working with all city divisions whose responsibility is to do service to Black children, such as Children's Services and PFNR, Parks, Rec, and Forestry, who do work with children. We're working directly with them on these actions.
And can you tell me then, with respect to our desire and our intent, how will this benefit Toronto and our community in general so that everyone will see a positive reflection? How will this report and all of the studies and all the things that you're doing, how will this benefit all of us?
So what we know is that because we are addressing the issues of one of the most marginalized people in our country and in Toronto, when we do that and when we take specific actions to address this and those people benefit, so Black children in particular benefit, we will see that benefit ripple across all groups of people, and especially those who are marginalized.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I went a little bit over your time. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, I'm looking at the year two work plan and priorities going forward. I guess there's probably no other better place to put it. Grouped in the chart, the table under improving customer service is where we see work in community education around policing policies. So I'm not sure whether or not the TPS views them as customers, but there's a comment, invest in community capacity building and public education on know your rights and policing community issues. When we say know your rights, is that specifically include that we're going to work in the community, not specifically as the TPS, but is SDF&A contemplating that city programs would also get involved in the rights and receipts policy education?
That is correct.
So rights and receipts, if I have to go back to the whole action plan report, which is another link that I didn't open to be reminded, is it clear in the action plan so that if I said to my councillors, I hope you've read this report, that's sort of the nickname for the policy we're talking about that should replace carding?
Through the chair, no, know your rights would not be know your rights. The Know Your Rights campaign speaks to education, so it would not replace carding.
So in this, invest in community capacity building, public education, know your rights, and policing community issues, listed as divisions and agencies that would engage in this, DPS is listed there, alongside of SDF&A. So how within this does the action plan here at the city go to any lengths to try and make sure that that policy is in fact rolling out through our community? It's a provincial policy as much as it is a municipal one, but is there any action going on to make sure not only that Torontonians understand that rights and receipts is a thing, but also that, is there any action that makes sure that TPS is actually following up and reporting annually whether or not, in fact, officers are using the policy?
So through the chair, we are working with TPS on this specific item right now, and we're very much, we meet with TPS often, we're working on this item as we speak, and there's a campaign being developed.
So with that campaign, although it's done in partnership, I think Greg Watts has left now. He was here for a long time, who was one of the team members working on that. So if that's being developed now, does that get reported to the police board, or would that come back at a later date as part of council's report back?
It comes back as part of council report back.
So we can actually expect to see some data on whether or not it's actually being employed in the police service, and we might ask for exchange of data so that we would know how many times that form gets used and whether or not, in fact, it's sort of embedded in the community's policing culture?
Through the board, it will be part of our year 2 report back to council, which will show outcomes and impact.
So you would look for hard data to really be able to do the outcomes, not just assurances?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Fletcher,
I
question?
just wanted to kind of explore the ways in which you and your staff are able to assist in when you're asked, and I hope you have been asked. There was a motion at the Board of Toronto Community Housing when the latest community safety program was put together that it be reviewed by the city in order to ensure that it isn't simply a policing model, or that the policing model takes a whole number of things into account, and particularly race relations at Toronto Community Housing. And I'm wondering if you've been able to work with them, and if you found that to be a useful request.
Through the Speaker, Social Development, Finance and Administration has worked closely with Toronto Community Housing on their community safety plan. The Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit was not directly involved with that, but that is certainly an area that we would be pleased to work on.
Sorry, just, you weren't involved in that discussion?
The Community Development Unit in SDFA worked very closely with TCHC on the violence reduction strategy. The staff in the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit wasn't directly involved.
Just,
They're two parts of our division.
yes?
So we worked very closely with the Community Development Group. The Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit was not directly involved at this point.
So the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Unit, would that be part of its role? Is that seen as part of its role, this
Absolutely.
type of a consultation?
Yes.
So is there still a chance to have that particular review?
Very much.
Since it's never been brought forward to the board or to, I don't know which committee it would go forward to, that looks like there's still time to make sure before the next tranche of officers is hired that the money is being secured for the right purposes at Toronto Community Housing.
Such a consultation is completely consistent with the work of the Anti-Black Racism Unit.
So should I move that today, or you can undertake to have that?
We will undertake to ensure that that conversation happens.
And so when this finally gets presented to a city committee and as well the Board of Toronto Community Housing, that it will have had the full input of the Anti-Black Racism Group, City Hall?
Yes.
And they'll be available to discuss the model, because would I be right to assume both of those things?
Absolutely. I don't want to presuppose the outcome of that work, but the unit would be pleased to work with TCHC and city staff on that project.
I guess that they be available to have the discussion about the model, because we are establishing a different model than was brought to the board initially by TCHC executive, which was simply a policing model. And after yesterday's video, so kindly given to us by Councillor Thompson, I think that your willingness to review whatever plan is in place is very important. So I'll just ask again that I don't need to make that, I'm happy to make that a motion if I need to in order to ensure that review takes place. But if you're giving me your
Through the
assurance.
Speaker, I am giving you that assurance on behalf of the division that work will occur.
And you feel you have the authority without a motion to tell TCHC that's council's will?
I would anticipate that TCHC would appreciate the engagement and advice, and we certainly have direction to undertake that, so we will do so.
And when would you anticipate this coming back to committee? Since it's to come back to committee.
That was your last question.
Thank you, Speaker.
Through the Speaker, I'm not sure when the report back through the TCHC board is scheduled, but we will work with them. Once that occurs, figure out what the timing would be to come back to committee here.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson to speak.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Speaker, I rise firstly to thank the Mayor, to thank him for his leadership on this very important issue. He has recognized that there are challenges and there are issues that are facing the Black community in this city. Other communities are facing issues as well, there's no doubt about that. He has taken the leadership and he's brought the members of the Black community in to discuss and to talk about what needs to be done to help a marginalized community so that they can feel that their desire, their wishes, and their hopes and their aspirations are met. And I thank the Mayor for that. I want to thank the staff as well. The Mayor has not only met with the Black community to learn from them, but has actually put in place a leadership team led by Mr. Berlinger and Ms. Anania Grant and her team to put together an action plan to address issues that have been brought forward. Speaker, I remember the Yonge Street riot. I remember those days when the Black community spoke out in varying voices and it appeared that no one was listening. We certainly have come a long way from that, and I'm very proud of our city for those actions and activities that have been taken to address this. There are some 200,000 people who consider themselves African Canadians and or Black in terms of their ethnicity. What is needed is a plan to help this marginalized community to create opportunities so that they can better themselves. And by bettering themselves, we become a better community. We address some of the fundamental social and societal ills that are causing such hardship within the context of the community. Speaker, I saw from my window last week a Black woman, young, well-dressed, searching for food in the 2 garbage bins that are on Bay Street. You would not have known that that person was hungry, but she was. And I couldn't get out of my office to go and offer her any assistance. I felt so ashamed. I couldn't get to her in time. I saw her took the food,
out of the garbage and started to eat it. And I was ashamed of myself that I couldn't help her. It's not going to happen anymore. We're going to help everybody that we can help, because it's so important that everyone realize that they are of value. Doesn't matter what the color of their skin are. And I think it's important for us as a member of council in this city, as we talk about those who have achieved so much, to realize that there are those who have not achieved much at all. And many of them look like me. And you may not understand that, but that brought it home for me when I saw that woman searching in our city for food to eat just to survive. It can't continue to happen. The plan that we're putting in place here is an attempt to address those fundamental things. There are many other people experiencing hardship, and I apologize for my emotions, but I have to tell you, when I saw that, I had not expected that in our city at all. And so it's happening. And so we need to do more. We need to step up our game, and that's why it's important for this group of people who are working on behalf of this great city to do more to help everybody in this city. Everyone should have dignity. Everyone should have an opportunity to have a decent life. All those young black children in this city and the parents who are having challenges should be able to thank you, should be able to have hope. This is part of that step, and I realize it's not enough, but we have to do more. And I want to thank everybody in this chamber for looking ahead and the team for doing more. Because while I may be happy in my life, there's so many people who look like me that aren't happy. And they can't be happy because there's not enough to help them to do more. So we have to have a plan. We have to build this plan on fundamental principles of wanting to help them. And we have to invest in the community so we can achieve more for all of us, not just some of us achieving. All of us have to achieve together, Speaker, because I think that this city owes a responsibility and a dedication, a debt to all of these people to make sure their lives are better. And thank you again, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, because Councillor Thompson's time was taken up, he had used his 5 minutes, I asked the questions regarding the rights and receipts policy that is a policy of this city and of this province at this point, because I know he would have. Back in 2011, when the community raised this as an issue and the media took it up, it was Councillor Thompson who took it up at the Toronto Police Services Board. And he started a long climb that took from 2011 to beyond his term on that board. I made a commitment to him that I would continue that struggle into the next term. And Councillor Lee was there with me, the citizen members of the board, and Mayor Tory, who really had to push on his chair of the board and of his chief of police to make sure that we actually finished Councillor Thompson's work. And finally, that made it so much of an imperative here that it became a provincial issue. And provincial consultation, all the way to the far north, exposed the fact that it isn't just an issue in the Toronto Police Service. It is an issue in policing, period.
Thank you.
Sadly, there is a policy. I'm actually not finished, Madam Speaker, if I could use my time.
No, I'm sorry. You said thank you, so I thought you were finished.
Oh, sorry. I'm thankful that it is a provincial policy now. Sadly, it isn't being used. And we complain in this council chamber about, well, we like to do things, but things are siloed. But we're actually happy to silo ourselves. That was a conversation going on over there in the board. And they solved it, so I don't have to think about it anymore. But today in your community, young men still don't know that if they're stopped informally, they're supposed to be told their rights first. And if they're stopped by a police officer, he's supposed to hand them a piece of paper that has their name on it and says the reason they were stopped. They're being stopped multiple times. There's a piece of paper that really stems from the work of Councillor Thompson, the Pacer community, Mayor Tory's term on the board. All of that led to a piece of paper that a young man can go home and say to Mom, I keep getting these pieces of paper from this same officer. This guy's hassling me, and something can be done about it. But that's why they don't give out the piece of paper. That's why they're not actually using the policy, because then we actually would be doing something about it. And so the informal thing that's going on now that is neither carding nor the thing that should be going on with accountability, an ability to really know how much is going on, is now lost, and there's just a whole murky amount of bias going on that we can't track. But we sit in this chamber and think it's all been handled somewhere else, and good, I've got a policy and we're done. We're not done. I've experienced it myself. It's happening here, it's happening in our school system, it's happening in our police system. Multiple times. My daughter has dealt with public servants in the school system and elsewhere when you go out to get services for your children. She said people, when they call her on the phone using whatever is the contact number, be shocked and dismayed that the parent of a black child is actually answering from a place of work. How could she possibly have a job? Why would you answer the phone that you're answering the phone from a hospital? Oh, you have a job. Amazing. That's bias. That's bias in the public service. And we don't stop and say, oh my God, we have to address that. We have to get that out of the public service. That little moment should never have happened. And that's the fight. You have to get rid of that. We have to get rid of that. We are the angels that people are hoping will create the miracle where that stops. Government. And that's why this isn't just a piece of policy that moves Councillor Thompson and he makes his speech and we're all moved for a moment. You have a daily responsibility to help the anti-black racism unit achieve this. So I hope that people all read year 2 of the plan. I hope that people all familiarize themselves with what our police policy and training should be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. On the item, recorded vote. Well, her name wasn't there. Okay.
Thank you, Speaker. I thought I had my name up, but apparently I didn't. We're all very tired, and I won't take too long because I know that we still have a long agenda, but I do think this is a critically important issue in front of us, and particularly having in the same council meeting our ombudsman's investigation yesterday, and now this work that our civil service has in front of it to confront anti-black racism and have a plan. And I do know that yesterday we did pass a motion, Councillor McKelvey and the mayor had a motion to work with Urban Alliance to expand opportunities for other youth, other than Muslim youth, to take advantage of a fellowship program. And I'm not moving a motion here today, but I do believe that if we're serious in our plan, that first and foremost, we need to be, number one, bringing in black youth into a fellowship program. So I'm not moving that motion, but I'm looking to the Anti-Black Racism Secretariat to say, please get on that, work with the Urban Alliance, work with the city clerk. I think council would be very happy to proceed in that direction. And it really opens up great opportunities for many young people to get a tremendous experience here at City Hall and allow councillors to use some of our time and abilities with fantastic youth. I also just want to go over the importance of having this secretariat review certain things, and this is in particular the violence prevention program at Toronto Community Housing. A violence prevention program, which had no elements of race laced into it until a number of board members, including our tenant board members, spoke up so strongly and said, do not create a TAVIS model here at Toronto Community Housing under the name of violence reduction, but have something that works with our community. So hearing that this Secretariat can work in a stronger way in looking at how to develop that, I think that's very important, and look forward to the results of that, I guess, in September all round, because that is a program where there are hiring requirements and a timeline on hiring requirements, which is being staffed up as very much a policing model at Toronto Community Housing. That's the second thing that I want to say. And third is, we also have on our agenda today, we have a number of things, and one is community benefits agreements. How important are those community benefit agreements that have been negotiated? Let's say at Metrolinx, the first one that was negotiated where official agreement on a big project. How long have we been talking about things like that, knowing how many billions of dollars we have in hiring power at the City of Toronto, the number of contracts that we have, where we can have some conditions there. Now, mind you, nobody wants to change how they work, including us. A year ago, we were told you have to change how you work. We're going down to 25. We said we can't do that. We are managing. It's hard, but we're managing. So nobody really wants to change. The contractors that bid on those things don't want to change. People want to do things the way they've always done them. Let's face facts. But the fact really is we have to change how that works. Size matters. Our contracts are big. We can contribute to job growth and learning and apprenticeships, many exciting things through community benefit agreements that we can include everywhere. And yes, I'm sorry, the numbers. In 2014, Metrolinx finalized a CBA with community partners that committed to aspirational targets for local hiring and social purchasing in the construction of the Eglinton Crosstown. To date, Toronto Community Benefits Network reports 115 apprentices hired and 152 professional, administrative, and technical jobs. That is putting our money where our mouth is. So very important to do. So let's continue being tangible. I know that Councillor Perutz is interested in looking at how well we're working with youth in Toronto Community Housing, their jobs, how well they're doing in getting jobs, getting training, lasting in jobs, full-time employment, and I think that's a very important initiative by the Anti-Poverty Act.
Thank you. We might have to hold this item down because I got another speaker. No, Councillor Lai, it's going to be long because we have to.
I will be quick, Madam.
Okay, go ahead. Because we only have 5 minutes.
Speaker, I will be very brief. I just can't help but to echo some of the sentiments of this chamber because I think color is, in living in the city with the racial, I think not only the black community will feel that. I think in my community, I feel that too, and I just couldn't help but to echo this sentiment and just tell you a very quick story about on Canada Day that I was driving to the Milliken Park fireworks, and I tried to get into the parking lot, but the police officer stopped me and saying that I can't go in, and I tried to explain to her that I'm the local councillor, I got to get in, and she just wouldn't let me go in there. And then the next day I tried to complain to the new superintendent of Division 42, and he said to me, Cynthia, you're not the only one. They didn't let me in either. So basically, I think there was because the new superintendent is the black. So I just wanted to echo quickly that we have this in a big city like City of Toronto, and Melvin used to be a neighborhood improvement area because of some of the good work for the youth that you've been doing in this council. I think I've been told that this area is my ward now, but I've been told that they have been removed as an NIA. And I just, I can't forget what Councillor Cressy said on the committee as wrapping up for the Economic Development and Community Development Committee. He says, quote unquote, diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. And I've used this in some of my speeches, and everybody echoed it. Very, 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 very good saying. I just wanted to commend the committee and commend this council for continue to doing a good job on this racial profiling. Thank you.
Okay, on the item, recorded vote.
The item is adopted unanimously, 21 in favor.
Okay, so, okay,
C 6.11.
okay, EC 6.11, Councillor Robinson is releasing. All in favor, carried. Recess to 2 o'clock.